the Weekly Show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with investigative journalist Scott Johnson.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got a really special guest. His investigative reporting has broke some of the biggest stories on the Gulf Coast in the past 2 years. And with the drop of his most recent pieces, Crash Call Collect and Old Shell Game, he has once again brought an important issue to the public's attention. Back after the break to chat about it all is Lagniappe reporter Scott Johnson. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. One of the other big stories you've been working on just broke recently regarding case running in Alabama. I know a lot of people won't know exactly what that means. Obviously, I do. But again, this isn't, an interview of me. It's an interview of you. So I know a lot of people won't know exactly what case running means. So can you break it down for our audience? What is case running, and what was your original tip that it might actually be happening here on the Gulf Coast?
The tip I got here is that there are patients, injury patients, who are being rapidly contacted. Some people have reported being called personally, on their cell phones, within hours of a traffic accident, or before or as soon as a traffic accident is published. So, how that is happening, that big question, is really what kind of led me into wanting to look at who owns this clinic, how is it operating, what kind of services are they pushing out, and really the big question, how in the world are they acquiring these details? So in Alabama, as you know, to even access a police report, you have to have the name, you have to have a date, you have to have a bunch of personal information beforehand to access a traffic report on the state troopers' website when they publish them. That doesn't answer the question for how they're contacting people before those are published, but even then, they know before, they know what they're looking for when they go to the public record. So what the tips I got were these traffic accident victims are being rapidly contacted and solicited, sometimes within hours, and other times either before a police report is filed or of the traffic accident or immediately after. So, it's ambulance chasing is another word for it. And you really are just chasing down injured individuals, and for the hopes of building a claim, an insurance claim, and having that legal work. Actually learned a new vocabulary word this last week, was barratry. So, it's I guess out in Texas, they actually have a barratry statute, and it's essentially just ginning up work for legal services. You're prying people's grievances for legal work.
And the thing about it from a solicitation standpoint is lawyers are essentially not allowed to cold call clients or have somebody on their behalf cold call clients, but yet that is essentially what's happening here, correct?
Yeah, you're and it's interesting. So everything, when I started looking into the clinics, it looked like there was a bunch of tiptoeing around. So, some of the things I began to hear about from some of the former patients I interviewed, the marketers would call and say, I'm a insurance patient advocate, or something along those lines, where
and that's not even a thing, by the way.
No. And it makes them sound like they're the insurance company, and also they're kind of skirting that law against lawyers contacting you, because they're not necessarily the lawyer. They're a telemarketing firm or something to that.
Or a healthcare provider. So they're using somebody, for lack of a better way of putting it, as a fence, as a go-between, to still essentially solicit the case, and eventually it will end up in a specific lawyer's hands, or certain lawyers that they've worked with, either that they're still working with now or that they may have worked with in the past, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So how deep does this go? How many people, firms, clinics, ancillaries have you found are connected with this?
So this is what really kept happening, is that every time I would find a layer, there was always another layer under it. So it wasn't just that I could find out who the lawyer is, or sorry, first of all, you try and look up who owns this place, and it's not even immediately clear. That was kind of like the first red flag. I was like, why is that a thing? You don't want that to be a thing with the healthcare provider you're going to. And then even when I found out who the owner was, there was another layer behind that. There was more unknowns and more questions. And so from there, it really from identifying the solicitation that was happening, I wanted to figure out what are they doing for patients. And I ended up calling and just cold calling them, and I didn't really identify myself. I just said, hey, what do you guys do up there? And I was able to get several of the workers from various clinics to actually kind of explain the process. And it's essentially just it's just this passive modality therapy. It's a glorified massage treatment plan where they send people through this like kind of pipeline of traction beds and eSIMs. There's no, and this was really kind of what was shocking to me, is it's this like this doc in the box kind of model. Yeah, there's no, even though this place was called South Alabama Medical and Rehab over on Old Shell Road. Everybody knows about it because everybody passes it every day. And every time I talked to a former patient, they were, oh, I thought that was a chiropractor's office, or I thought that was a doctor's office. There is no doctor that works there. There is no
doctor, any nurse practitioner?
There are nurse practitioners, but
do they do anything that you can tell? I mean, is there a chiropractor even on premises?
No, there's no chiropractor. There's no physical therapist.
So they're not getting therapy in that sense. They're getting essentially put on a bed that has the little and electrostim and hot and cold packs, and they're doing everything but chiropractic adjustments, physical therapy. None of the actual therapy occurs.
Yeah, and it's very low level things that they can technically hand off to a nurse practitioner.
So just because I feel like our audience really deserves to know, who are the specific law firms and clinics which you have found colluding in this, and how did you find they were all connected? Because that web seems to be very difficult to. That was one of the things that impressed me the most about your articles, is that you figured this out. You seemingly figured out everything except for how they're getting people's names.
Yeah, and I might have figured that out too, but we'll see. So we were joking around earlier. The yarn boards where you string everything back and forth. I feel like I should have done that because I get so lost in the details. But if I had built a board, I would basically have the names of Dr. Michael Kent Planbeck. He would be the middle one. Planbeck is a chiropractor formerly from Texas, and a lot of people know the name in the legal world, insurance world, because he was notorious for this model that he set up, where he had basically created an enterprise of interworking businesses, of telemarketing firms, chiropractic clinics, and management firms and consulting. And they were all coordinating together in the insurance, in this insurance claim in the injured process, trying to basically be the touch point at every turn to extract any bit of wealth or value out of a claim that can happen. Well, he actually, Texas tried to prosecute him back in the early 2000s. Kind of a botched process. I think there were some weird things that happened in the grand jury system, but ended up not happening in the criminal side. But Allstate ended up suing him and had a pretty large award of like 3.9 million. And they sued him under the RICO Act, the Racketeering, Influence, and Corruption Organization. Act. I didn't realize that was a cause of action for a civil suit, but I thought it was only criminal. So that was the news to me. But so we have this RICO enterprise guy that's been linked, Plan Beck. And it was kind of crazy because at first I didn't even know who this was. I had no idea who Plan Beck was. It was because I was digging into this, the owner of this local clinic, Chad Lovelace. I randomly came across one business filing where Chad Lovelace uses a different address. It's the only time I've seen him use this address. It's a 1919 Veterans Memorial Boulevard in Kenner, Louisiana, Suite 200. Only time I've seen him use that. And I was kind of getting it to the point where it was like I'm exhausting all my leads. So I was just trying to search every address that came up. Well, that address that he included on one filing when he closed a business in Florida, ties right back to that Kenner, Louisiana address, which is incidentally the office for Chiropractic Strategies Group, or Michael Plan Beck's office. So it was from there. It was just like the whole story just kind of exploded right in front of me. And I was like, there's no way this is connected. This is crazy, because you essentially have this blueprint template that this guy created, 20, 30 years ago being, picked up and laid down and executed again. And he's essentially regrown his whole enterprise. Now, to your point, with the lawyer and the legal aspect, this latest iteration that we have here, he has basically enveloped the entire claim. So he had most of the claim before, and he's not even constrained to chiropractic work anymore. They've dropped the chiropractic work. Now it's just, this doc in the box nurse practitioner thing. Basically they're super flexible. They can
this vague, ambiguous treatment plan that really arguably doesn't do a whole lot for the patient regardless.
And inflates cost rapidly. So they were like, I think one source told me the kind of, the goal was $16,000. And this is, 12-week plan, just outrageous cost for what you're getting. So this current iteration of Plan Beck's enterprise has now breached and closed full circle. They had most of the claim before, but now they have all of it, because now there is their own law firm involved. So over the years, they had to use local attorneys, or other law firms
they'd have to find a law firm either in state or out of state. They'd have to find somebody in state with a license, and they'd have to have that person be the attorney. But of course, that person then is sticking their neck out ethically. So those people eventually get chased off. And now they're using some sort of attorney type thing in-house. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they have basically, deployed one of their own as a lawyer and with a law firm.
Is it true at some point you found yourself searching for a lawyer who simply doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's where that whole side of the story started. The patients that I spoke with recalled talking to someone named Baker. This is when I was still kind of under the impression that they were just using out-of-state law firms, which was kind of a red flag anyway. You want to use someone you want to use someone who's vested in the state. Somebody
who's going to be regulated by the state they're in.
Yeah, exactly. And someone you can verify is actually in a lawyer. So what looked like has happened is in the past year, they've started to try and taper off any third-party lawyers that were being involved. One of the patients I spoke with said they started talking about a Baker, John Baker. And that was curious to me because I couldn't find any record of this guy. I got a business card that shows John Baker at 60 Commerce Street in Montgomery, which there's no record of that being a bona fide law office at all. So that question right there led to, I'm asking the state bar, do you guys have membership? I'm asking the Montgomery County Bar, do you guys have membership for this guy? I called every single John Baker on the state bar directory, and they all, I got feedback from every single one of them. Just be like, hey, that's not me.
I think there's like 4 or 5 lawyers named John Baker in the state, and none of them are this person on his card.
Yeah, I was like, I want to make sure. So I literally contacted every single one of them. And so I don't know if I definitely can't verify him as a lawyer. He's definitely not verified in Alabama. I don't even know if he's a lawyer at all. And I don't know if he's a real person at all. No, I've got no evidence. The patients can't talk to him. They can't get him on the phone after retaining him. So I get, so trying to figure that out. I get it, his business card links him to something called Vasic Law Group up in Washington, D.C. And then I get a contingency. I obtain a contingency agreement from one of the clinics that links him to an Arizona law firm in Sterling. It's called Sterling Shield Legal out in Arizona. So just from past reporting, that's a red flag too. And Arizona, Washington, D.C. both have something in common. They allow these alternative business structures for law firms. Basically, you can have non-attorney membership vested as decision-making holders in law firms, which
in every state except those 2 areas, except for DC and Arizona, the 49 other actual states all have bar rules that say that for you to have an ownership interest in a law firm, you have to be a lawyer. And the only exception is if a lawyer is married and they die, then their wife may inherit their share, but they still, or their spouse, let's not necessarily say wife or husband. A female lawyer could pass, or even if you've got a same-sex situation, and anybody's spouse can die, and the attorney spouse can die, and the non-attorney spouse will gain an ownership interest, but I don't think they get any kind of decision-making interest because they're not a licensed attorney. And you're saying that in Arizona and D.C., Joe Blow, who doesn't have to pass the bar, can own part of a law firm and can finance advertising, marketing, all kinds of things to generate profit as a non-lawyer in a law firm.
Yes. And that's, I think Utah has some kind of provision. I'm not familiar with the hoops you have to go through in Utah. Washington, DC is actually just wide open, I believe. I think you might have to have a local attorney. And then Arizona, you have to actually go through a committee to have your firm established that way.
And this group went through some sort of type of committee like that at some point, and it was kind of an interesting hearing from what I understand, correct?
Exactly. So that, when I got that contingency agreement, links it to Sterling Shield, which means that you've got a lawyer from one firm having his legal fees and contingency fees, all the revenue going out through another firm, which that's weird. And so anyway, so I'm almost like, okay, let's look into it's called the ABS, Alternative Business Structure Committee out in Arizona. And, these ABS ownership things are weird anyway, but it was interesting to watch the meeting. They have it online. You can go watch it. Even their eyebrows are raising when they start to hear kind of the explanation of what this law firm is and what it's going to do. So, appearing in that meeting is a man named Harold Dawson. He's like an Iowa attorney, just who was moving to Arizona to be, retire basically. And then you have this other attorney whose name is William Daniel Vasic, who is he is the out-of-state attorney. They've teamed up. They want to build this law firm out in Arizona. He is the non-attorney at that point, and he's teaming up with a Iowa attorney that's coming. And one of the committee members is when they approached the vote, and he said, "This sets the record for weird." We have a Florida resident, this William Vasic, who's from Florida, he says he's getting his bar license in DC, and he has a business established in Alabama already, is under the same Sterling legal name, and he's teaming up with this guy from Iowa. It's just red flags everywhere. The law firm gets authorized in a 4-3 vote, and it was very interesting and enlightening to hear that. Now, one of the things that William Vasic shares in that was also pretty consequential. Consequential. So William Vasick is 27 years old. He's a young guy. And one of the committee members actually warns him. He's like, to this older Harold Dawson, you know, you got to be careful. You got a young attorney. You got a young guy here. You got to be very vigilant. Well, William Vasick passes the bar in November. So November 2024, he creates a Washington, D.C. law firm called Vasick Law Group, which is the law group that's on the back of John Baker's business card here in Alabama. And then, so what he shares in that ABS meeting that was really critical is talking about his resume. That he has his background in operating medical practices, and he's with this management firm called Skyrise Management, and they, a string of medical practices and et cetera. In that, so I was wondering, that hit a light with me because William Vasick's one of the aspects on his resume is S management. I didn't know what S management was. Well, Skyrise Management. The only record of Skyrise Management I was ever able to find. I can't find a business registration anywhere. I might just not be looking in the right state, but the only bona fide listing I could find was the Better Business Bureau. Well, guess what address is listed on the Better Business Bureau?
The address from Kenner.
The address from Kenner, Suite 200 specifically. The cell phone is Planbeck's cell phone.
So it all comes back to Planbeck.
Everything comes back to Planbeck.
Being a lawyer myself, I know the laws and the ethical rules when it comes to injury cases and what's allowed and not allowed. So how are these, and I already know the answer, but again, this is for our audience, how are these entities getting away with this in Alabama? What would otherwise be an illegal or unethical practice in our state?
Yeah, and maybe that's why they've capitalized in Alabama, is because they've, again, I'm talking about towing the line. They're really not under the oversight of anybody. They're not to a point where the medical boards and medical oversight committees would be coming down on them in terms of how they're structured. There might be some avenues through that with licensing boards, but that'd be kind of peripheral. And then, even the state bar, the state bars, they over the ethics of lawyers and, how do you police or enforce actions for a member that's not your bar member? So
now my understanding is the Alabama bar, it has recently made some moves in that maybe as early as December, January, February, there will be some new rules that will go into effect from Alabama that will say the Alabama bar will now have the ability to force you to comply with out-of-state lawyers to comply with Alabama bar rules when you're doing anything in the state.
Yeah, and they're gonna. So what I understand is that that's what the bar opinion has always been, is that you fall under the bar rules if you're practicing in Alabama. Now what they're doing in January.
But there's something new on the horizon that gives them more teeth, no?
Yeah, they're gonna make it explicit. So that's the new laws that have been approved by the Alabama Supreme Court for the professional conduct, and they're gonna spell it out and make it explicit, and basically they're gonna seek reciprocal discipline, and anything that they get, they are going to they're going to hold you accountable to Alabama standards, and then they're going to refer those decisions out to either the state bar that you're registered with or the federal bar, and with the hopes that those other states open up a show cause themselves or a hearing and have that lawyer explain what's going on.
What do people who get injured need to be on the lookout for based on what you've learned about this group? Because it basically sounds like they could be funneled into this racket from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah, the biggest targets are the people who haven't been in accidents yet, who don't know how the claims process is.
Somebody who's never had a prior wreck. Because that seemingly, I will say this, that, from the people that I've spoken with, other attorneys, one consistent theme is that the clients that what we've now called defectors, the people who've defected from this group and hired actual real lawyers in our city so that they can, one, have real representation, and two, so they can get treatment that is more than this, feel good stuff that you're talking about. So people who are really hurt can get really better. And they seem to be, one common theme is that these are all people who've never had a wreck before. So they don't know how it's supposed to work. So that's how they take advantage of them, right?
They've never had a wreck before. They call when their telemarketers call, they brand it as free care. Obviously the settlement with the insurance companies paying for everything, but they're branding it as free care. So they're also looking for lower income individuals. They're probably profiling based off zip codes and et cetera when they're looking through these reports. Interesting note here, and maybe this is a side rail, but Plan B's been in Mobile before, popped up right next to the Mobile Police Department. What they were doing, they were sending over at the time, they were just sending over an employee to go look at the traffic accidents.
Yep.
Right next door and writing down information.
And then law enforcement put a stop to that. At that point, law enforcement put a stop to that. And once they couldn't get the numbers, and a couple of TV stations did stories on it. I remember that because I was interviewed back then. So do you have an idea? You said you may have an idea as to how they are getting the information on these folks. But before I even ask that, now I think about it, there is one other common element racially, right?
Right.
Does it appear that the vast majority of the people that they're targeting are African-American?
Every attorney I've spoken with who has what you call defectors, they all say guaranteed 95+%. I mean, if not higher, are all Black African-American individuals. Again, it's just, they've got to just be profiling based on whatever they're seeing on those traffic reports. I mean, I know of cases where, a couple of lawyers have had their legal aids called, et cetera. I think there is some scattershot in there, but I think there's some detailed targeting. And like even in housing advertising, you can't, it's against the rules a lot of times to, even advertise based on zip code, just because you can determine so much by just that number. So they're definitely profiling people and reaching out.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to reporter Scott Johnson for joining us again. Stay safe, everyone.